All Asians are smart, all black people like chicken, all Mexicans are illegal, all Muslims are terrorists. Are these true? Probably not. These are some commonly known stereotypes that most of us have heard of. But what are stereotypes? How did it begin and develop? How does it influence our society today? Stereotypes are a way of categorizing people based on a wide fixed image or idea. Although studies show that it's natural and a common instinct for humans to value each other, stereotypes are the belief that the characteristics of an individual represent all the members of that individual's social group. One of the most common groups that are targeted by stereotypes is African American people. African American stereotypes originated during the slavery era, continuing through modern times. This racial stereotype shapes the attitudes that society has in this group of people, both then and now.
African Americans are commonly stereotyped as poor, dirty people that are constantly taking advantage of government welfare programs. Where did these misconceptions come and develop from? Taking a look back in history, we can say that these false and biased assumptions began as early as the colonization of America. When the system of slavery was still around, Europeans thought of Africans as an inferior race due to the dark nature of their skin. They were thought to be simple-minded, ape-like savages who depended on their plantation masters to feed and support them. This stereotype of black people is soon broadcast in minstrel shows and theaters, creating a source that perpetuates white people viewed African Americans at the time. Two of the most famous early stereotypes of African Americans during the 18th and 19th century were Jim Crow and the Sambo.
In 1832, white performers would darken their faces with burnt cork and portray a typical African American slave. It became one of the most famous and influential portrayals of how black people are supposedly be. This caricature came to be known as Jim Crow. Jim Crow portrayed black people as shuffling and drawing, cracking and dancing, wisecracking, and high-stepping buffoons. Since many white people from the North did not have much contact with African Americans, this portrayal became the image of African Americans to North and Western people. As the popularity of Jim Crow increased, the methods of demonstrating black people in this kind of negative light evolved as well. Soon, African American actors began to play these roles in movies or theaters.
Another famous depiction of African Americans was the Sambo. This stereotype dates back as early as the colonization of America. This caricature portrayed the typical African American male slave as a fat, wide eyed black man who acted as a happy, overgrown child that was reliant on his master. The Sambo was also portrayed as lazy, careless, and irresponsible. This stereotype was transmitted through music, stories, games, etc.
These two major stereotypes may have evolved to the stereotypes of African Americans now. As showed in history, the early depictions that black people are lazy, irresponsible, careless, and reliant to white people may have contributed to the idea that they are poor and reliant to government welfare programs now.
As shown, the major contributor to stereotypes is media. Media has played a major role of how African Americans have been portrayed since the colonization of America. Whether it is in the form of a story, movie, play, or song, media has been an influential source that perpetuated the views of millions of people. However, stereotypes, unfortunately, still exist in media today. For example, Sapphire in the television show Amos and Andy is a stereotype of a black woman who is depicted to be strong, overbearing, and controlling. Sapphire was created to place a negative views on any black woman who dared to say anything about the horrible conditions that they had to face. This stereotype is also depicted as always yelling, starting fights, and offending men. Reality TV is probably the best example of media that is keeping this stereotype alive. Reality TV highlights fights between black women and failed relationships with men, which enhances the stereotype that black women are overbearing and manipulative.
Picture a large woman with pitch black skin and shining white teeth, wearing a drab calico dress and headscarf, and you will begin to know the stereotype of Mammy. The idealized Mammy was unattractive, undesirable by white men, but a wise caretaker. She raised the master's children and loved them dearly, and often gave advice to her mistress. The Mammy stereotype originated from movies and literature. Author Margaret Mitchell's classic novel portrays the most famous Mammy and was played perfectly by Hattie McDaniel in the 1939 movie of the same name, Gone with the Wind. This same stereotype still exists in movies today. For example, Madia in Tyler Perry's films has a little more attitude than the original Mammy. She still is large, wise, and she still takes care of and gives advice to a white family.
Some stereotypes result in real bias and injustice. For example, a stereotype appearing frequently in pop culture is that of an African American male as a criminal. This stereotype originated when slaveholders began associating African Americans with crime to justify slavery. It continues today with the rise of drug-related violence and homicides in the inner cities. Perhaps as a result, African Americans are much more likely to be arrested for crimes of violence than other racial groups. They are overrepresented in the American prison system. They are 6 times more likely to spend time in prison than whites. They receive up to 60% longer prison sentences than whites who commit similar federal offenses. Perhaps as a further result, children at a young age are biased against people of a darker color. Psychologists Kenneth and Mimi Clark provided this phenomenon to be true back in the 1930s with their famous doll experiment. Psychologists today reenacted this experiment and showed the results today are mostly the same. Some African American children, or those with darker skin tones, prefer lighter skin today. White children, or those with lighter skin tones, are biased towards those with darker skin with opinions such as, this child is the ugly child because she's black.
Overall, there are many stereotypes of African Americans. Most date back to slavery times and have received widespread recognition by and through all forms of media. These stereotypes have affected society's views of African Americans both then and now. The characterizations of African Americans not only influence the way other people view the social group, but also influence how African Americans view themselves.